I have a right to quality services.
Women before didn't have a voice. They can be part of the decision-making process. They're demanding for quality healthcare.
During COVID-19, we faced many challenges, many problems.
I spent a lot of money to access the medication, so COVID-19 has been a help for me.
I would like to urge the government to support primary and healthcare services.
COVID-19 is laying bare the gaps in the health system, exposing gender, racial, and class inequities everywhere.
This is not new. Around the world, women, adolescents, and families have long voiced what we need, what we want, what we deserve.
We want quality care, including respectful and dignified treatment, with means to redress wrongs.
We want clean health centers and schools with running water and toilets.
We want health workers, especially midwives and nurses, who are respected and supported so they are better placed to provide respect and support.
We want to feel safe, whether at home or in a hospital, with those who are meant to care for us.
We want equal protection and promotion of our rights, including sexual and reproductive rights, no matter who we are and what we represent.
We want essential information, supplies, and services for sexual and reproductive health, for maternal and newborn health, for child and adolescent health, within reach during an emergency and every day.
Our demands are not new, but perhaps the world is finally ready to truly listen,
to act, to invest in a way never seen before.
To let the voices of communities light the way out of this pandemic and into a more healthy, equitable, and prosperous world for all.
Decades of progress hang in the balance. There is no equity without a fair response to all. There is no recovery without equity.
Muy buenos días a todas y todos. Qué bonito se siente hablar en español.
Good morning to everybody. Welcome to the second day of Lives in the Balance. Yesterday, we heard some of the incredible leaders that have inspired us to try to get equity during the pandemic. But first of all, let's think about what we heard yesterday. We've asked all of you to tweet your messages, so let's see what your messages say. Of course, many people are very happy to listen to Nene Cherry, which is such a talented woman. And I would like to thank our production team, because they are the ones that are doing of this event something great. And then something very interesting, Matthias Bullhalter, who's talk about the 3 Ds, dollars, doses, and domestic manufacturing. Thank you to all of you that are outside. Keep on sharing your opinions with us. Today, we're going to listen to what leaders from the whole world have to say about how they are responding to this goal. What is the impact of COVID-19 on girls, children, women in their countries? What are they doing, and how can they be responsible? But before listening to these leaders, there's something we have to say. We're going to listen to 2 women that represent passion, the passion that we all need to survive to these difficult times. We're going to listen to Julieta Martinez, a very young activist who has created tremendous in Chile and Latinas for Climate. She will be talking with the High Commissioner of Human Rights and ex-President of Chile, Michelle Bachelet. I know that there are some critical points that she wants to talk about with Michelle about human rights, about the importance of leadership to get better results. Julieta, up to you.
miles de millones de vidas que se encuentran en la balanza en este momento crítico. Sabemos bien que la pandemia del COVID-19 ha profundizado las desigualdades y ha puesto de manifiesto y agravado las violaciones a los derechos humanos. Ahora, desde su punto de vista en particular, habiendo liderado una nación y ahora liderando los esfuerzos globales para promover los derechos humanos, ¿qué cree que los gobiernos y la comunidad de desarrollo deben hacer para proteger a las mujeres, niñas, niños y adolescentes a lo largo de todo el mundo?
Bueno, muchas gracias, Julieta. Encantada de tener esta conversación contigo. Efectivamente, la pandemia ha afectado desproporcionadamente a las mujeres, a las niñas, ¿no? Y a los niños, pero también a otros grupos, a las personas mayores, a las personas de la comunidad LGTBI, a las personas con discapacidad. Y las ha afectado no porque las mujeres y las niñas tengan algo intrínsecamente, la vulnerabilidad no es por alguna característica intrínseca, es más bien por la discriminación profunda y las desigualdades en las cuales se han visto ellas afectadas permanentemente. Entonces, ¿qué hacer? Bueno, lo primero que nada es que hay que darle prioridad a la igualdad de género. Yo por eso me sumo a tu alegría por la
We must give priority to gender equality, and I join you in the happiness that you feel for the new constitution in Chile, because that's where we need to express in different ways gender equality.
Domesticar, podríamos decir, hacerlo compatible esta constitución con otras leyes domésticas internas, ¿no? Lo que falte por avanzar, hay cosas que ya están.
We have a lot to do, but the problem is that women don't have gender equality and we don't have equal opportunities. There are very few women in high-level positions, and their response to COVID-19, out of the 225 working groups on COVID-19, only 24% of the members are women. So if you don't have enough women in those groups where the decisions are being made in public policies and other subjects, if you don't put yourself in the shoes of women, then we will not be able to tackle the crisis. So we need to take into account women and their different specificities in different areas. It's not the same if you have a professional woman who has a very fancy house with electricity and running water than being a woman who lives in a camp with no access to running water. And then we have to tell her to wash her hands every day. It's different realities. So in order for women and children to be protected, we need policies that are sensible to gender. And we can't just assume that there is no gender equality and that we cannot treat women and men in the same way. And in that sense, I believe that the response to the pandemic must be taken from a human rights gender optic. And in terms of children, the UN Population Fund, for example, predicted that child marriage will increase with the pandemic. So many things that in which we were making progress, we are seeing a backlash. They predicted an increase in poverty, child marriage, and this happens because many families don't have the means to feed their families. So they have to marry their daughters off, and a vicious cycle. We've seen more child labor, and that means that they're more exposed to violence because they are locked in with adults all the time. So we need to guarantee the right of children to have the best possible start of their lives. That's why I'm such a big fan of early childhood development and integral education at an early stage in their lives, because that's where we need to start struggling against that stigma that makes women be perceived as a second-class citizen. I agree completely. I think that's a very important point. These are the problems that women are facing today, and we are the ones who understand that. So we have to be in the decision-making roles and participate. That is a very thin line. We need to understand that we have different realities, that we live in different parts of the world. And we have to put these points on the table. My next question, High Commissioner, we have seen many women suffering from systematic abuse and violations of their human rights. The violence against women is something that we could even name a shadow pandemic. How do we stop these abuses and how do we prevent future ones? And who's responsible for these changes and who's failing women and children? Yes, the characteristics of the pandemic, and the confinement that came with it and all the restrictive measures that were taken to limit the spread of the disease and not overcrowd the hospitals, all of these factors have made domestic violence even worse. There was an increase in domestic violence in all continents, not only in Latin America. In Latin America, we've had several high levels of feminicides. Several countries have responded with specific policies during the pandemic. In certain countries, women were taken to hotels, for example, so that they wouldn't have to spend time with a violent partner. They were moved to other places. In other places, they came up with very sophisticated systems, such as calling a pharmacy with a secret code, saying, for example, I need a red mask. And that meant, I'm in danger, please come help me, so that somebody could go and rescue them where they were being beaten up. So even though there are measures in place, even though we have laws, impeccable laws, the reality is that the implementation of those laws is not enough. We have ministries, we have secretariats for women, but those are always the smallest ones and the ones that have the least amount of funding. And therefore, the implementation of these laws does not go hand in hand with implementation. So we are all responsible. You could have authorities responsible, parliamentarians responsible for the legislations and effective legislations, but we are all responsible. We're part of a community. We are citizens, and we can do something about it. And that happens because we have girls and boys having this perception that they don't have any rights. And we need to instill this knowledge in them. They need to know that they have rights, equal rights. And this is what's keeping women and girls from exercising their rights. They believe that there is a natural place for women in society as the weaker sex. So the 12 countries that responded the best to the first stages of the pandemic, 7 out of those 12 countries were led by women, and I love repeating that. We have to open up and listen to other countries and their realities. So any measure that we could that allow us to protect girls from the risk of violence is key. Girls, and that this would allow girls to have the same rights as men. And that comes from home. And we need to work with the parents to that end. When I had a program in Chile with the daycare centers, we try to work with the parents. And in many countries, this has been also tried out, but we have a lot of work to do. Yes, I'd like to mention the intergenerational dialogue. It is amazing what girls and young girls are doing. One girl in Poland created a fake cosmetic line. So for every item that you bought, you were reporting a crime. Another one in Spain created a hotline to help girls in danger. And you see many girls in rural areas doing the same. So you help your neighbor. And it is amazing what we are seeing, so that the voices of girls and adolescents is being heard to find effective solutions. It's amazing. Yes, I think we have good ideas. But when I was working at UN Women, a girl said, I don't want to be part of the table. I want to decide whether the table is squared or round. I don't want to be included at the end of the decision-making process. I want to be there from the inception. So that's something I always love to repeat. The other amazing phrase that I like to say is nothing about us without us. Yes, we repeat that all the time. We're the only ones who understand the problems that affect us. Thank you. My third question. High Commissioner, we have seen a great impact around on health and sexual and reproductive rights. It is calculated that 12 million women have had or suffer from interruptions in the health services, which has led to a 1.4 million unwanted pregnancies. You made lots of progress in this regard in Chile. So I would like to ask you, what are the lessons that you learned from that experience that we can apply to promote reproductive, sexual, and health rights for women? And what are the main challenges that the governments are facing to make this a reality? Yes, for many reasons. In some poorer countries, there's an ideology regarding this decision. So the resources that were meant for this sexual and reproductive rights, they were redirected to help the pandemic. There are many statistics also in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have different figures that show the amount of women affected by this lack of services, and also other obstacles to their sexual and reproductive rights. Other researchers show that there was a 10% decrease due to the pandemic to women and girls. So that over 49 million did not receive any sexual and reproductive health assistance, which could generate unwanted pregnancies and also abortions, dangerous abortions. In many parts of the world, these services were considered non-essential, so they were shut down. So we are facing a challenge in terms of our traditional values, and this is normalizing misogyny and the role of women in the family and procreation. So this is a setback in terms of reproductive and sexual rights, that it is hindering the development and of people in terms of decision making about their own bodily autonomy, everything that allows women to be more empowered. So we need to know what we want. You need to know what you want in terms of your own body, and you have to find the best strategy to carry out that decision. I consider, for example, that I couldn't impose on any women a decision about their body. But what I could do was to make sure that she had all the options so that she could make an informed decision based on her values, religion, etc. So there are always men making decisions about women's bodies, and that's what we need to fight against. We are at a turning point. As the Universal Human Rights Declaration said, we need to keep developing gender equality. The challenges then are several. We need to give rights to women, rights that are special for them. Also, faith-based organizations, such as the churches, are playing a very important role in these traditional values. I think that people choose their own religion. And it is not about one religion imposing their beliefs upon another one. We need to decide on our own lives. I agree. I completely agree. Education has a fundamental role. An educated girl is not only better prepared to face the world, but they can change the world. everything, all of the structural divisions and inequalities are becoming so normal that we're just forgetting about them. We don't even see them anymore. So there's a point when you say, okay, stop, we need to stop. Yes, Julieta, I think you're right. It is so evident what COVID-19 has shown us. This structural inequality has been made so evident within countries, between countries, and the human right value has been strengthened, just like it happened after the two world wars. But this hasn't happened yet. Instead of looking at this collectively and take responsibility as a world, we have had a tendency to be individualistic. I worry about myself and not what's happening to my neighbor. So I still hope that this situation makes us change our mind about that and say, stop inequalities, and that we can finally change reality. That's my dream, and I really hope that that's the dream. I would like to talk about climate change now. Climate change and impact on health. As you said, as you know, I co-founded Latinas for Climate, an organization of young girls. Today, climate change has a very important impact on the results on healthcare, but it's also an accelerator of inequalities. The pandemic exacerbates threats and it puts girls and adolescents at a higher risk of illnesses. How do we mitigate that risk, in particular in those populations that are highly vulnerable and of high risk? Taking into account my previous question, who is responsible for this? Yes, the pandemic has shown that for many years we had a concept that spending on health was a very high cost and not an investment. Even the most powerful European countries or the US were not ready for that expense, for that investment in the health system. And this crisis has to be faced with knowledge, not with a lack of knowledge. I think the states have the duty to protect health of every single citizen, whether it's the private sector or in private clinics or state-owned clinics. The service has to be of good quality. So what do we have to do? First of all, this pandemic is as big as Ebola and other ones that were very infectious, that came from animals to wild animals to domestic animals, and then to the human being. So for us, it's key to understand three things: climate change, and everything that has to do with the Paris Agreement, etc., needs to be taken into account. But respect for nature and also a better maintenance of biodiversity. There will be a COP in Glasgow. I don't know if you were there, but I didn't see you. It was planned, but because of the pandemic, we don't know if it's going to happen virtually or face to face, but it was planned. And there will also be an entire year on the framework of agreement on biodiversity. And that's very important for the states to be able to move forward. COP Madrid did not yield many results on the Kyoto Protocol. So this year has to be the year because we're running out of time. We must do everything we can because the planet needs us. The planet is affected. And those who are already being discriminated will be discriminated even more. So we have to do several things. We need to have a new social contract with opportunities for everyone, because there is no social contract today, and people feel that. We need to prioritize the systems or investment in healthcare, public healthcare, systems of social protection, Those are essential investments so we can support everyone, eliminate stereotypes, eliminate discrimination, expensive systems that don't work. It is also very important to have public participation so that we have a more efficient participation. We need to know about the needs of the population, and that means an urgency to recognize that we have to take care of the planet. How can we integrate provision of health and human well-being? The good news that I want to share is that over 180 countries have ratified a convention that says that the human beings have the right to a healthy environment, free of pollution. And we have to protect those who protect the environment. And this is a decisive year for that. We need to face the climate emergency, and we're all responsible. We need to change our patterns for consumption. Otherwise, we won't get anywhere. So the damage that climate change can have, the impact that it can have, it might be even bigger than COVID-19. We need to take an intersectional approach because we will face droughts, conflict. When there's no water, people enter into conflict. The communities are fighting for water. So when you mix all that and you put a pandemic on top of all that, it will be catastrophic. So I think we can avoid it, but we need to act now. Yes, we need a civil society that is more educated and that is present when we act. And I think we need to take a gender perspective, especially for women. That's fundamental. And I would like to see that happen in Chile. That would be great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And now I have a question for you. You're a young woman. You're an activist. And I'd like you to share your ideas on the impact that COVID-19 has had in the youth. What are the crucial elements and concerns that you have?
First of all, thank you for answering all of my questions. It's a real source of inspiration to me. Well, I mentioned some of the concerns we had already. I think that we have different realities here, whether we're talking about young girls, adolescents, or women. I think the important thing is to be connected, interconnected. This pandemic, this health pandemic, as well as an economic and political one, I think will have a huge impact. I think it has also had very bad effects on mental health in addition to physical health. People have been suffering from solitude, from fear, so there's a social impact here. And in fact, the crisis is affecting all of us as a whole. I don't think we can individualize any of this. As human beings, we're a collective. So when we think about tools about how to deal with this, we have to think about tools that are inclusive and interconnected so that we can carry out this collective effort. And mainly, I think that if we look at the most vulnerable groups, we see women and children. I think we need to open a new battlefield here of a virtual nature to fight solitude, to fight the confinement and all of the effects that this crisis has had. And this crisis has shown us the bad side of things. We've seen the inequalities. And I think this is a fundamental point that we have to put out on the table for everyone to consider. For example, on my continent, only 70% of the people in Latin America and Caribbean have access to internet. Many of the girls and women don't even have that opportunity. They can't follow things on internet. They even have to give up things like education. So this is a universal right, education, that's being violated, especially as concerns young girls, where the figures are even worse. In Chile, the subsecretariat published figures recently. Out of every 4 students that had online classes, only 1 was a woman. So this shows the inequality here. This is going to condemn young girls to just being domestic laborers at home, depriving them of the education that would allow them to have a different life. We all know that the world has changed, and I think we now have to work towards overcoming this. So let's take digital rights into account. It should be an essential human right. And I think we also have to bear in mind the importance of mental health. And I have to, with all my heart, say to everyone, we must tell them that they are not alone. Youth must feel, and we must see them as an active part of society, that have opinions, that want to often be involved in the decision-making process. And it might be a way to solve problems that affect them today. I've seen that often children have excellent ideas when it comes to issues about young children. So often they're able to open our eyes to things we wouldn't have seen. So I think if we work with that kind of approach, we will be able to make progress. And lastly, it's crucial to bear in mind that all of the problems that we're facing today are interconnected. Whether we're talking about health, we're talking about human rights. When we're talking about gender inequality, we're talking about everything else. So we have to start thinking about solutions in those terms. That's called intersectionality, and that has to be the center of our focus. We have to see how these are not separate problems, but everything is interrelated. And I think these solutions have to come with us and not for us. That's what I think one of the excellent advantages of having this kind of a conversation is. We've covered so many different topics, and we see that they are all connected. Quite right. The fact is, well, when I listen to you, it's very enriching. And I feel proud to listen to you, Julieta, because I think that many times adults don't take into consideration what young people have to say. They think that they won't be a source of creativity. Quite the contrary. I'm convinced that young people have that capacity to surprise us. And I love being surprised. So it's a source of pride to me, and I congratulate you on your efforts. And I think that all of the new blood that has arrived in our country will also help bring in new ideas here to deal with these issues. So we, in December, we're going to be celebrating Human Rights Day, and it'll be very important to bring children and women into this. And after listening to you, I'm really encouraged to have that kind of participation from you. Thank you very much. I think that the young people have been making great contributions already, and this is going to be continuing. Different young people from different perspectives working on different initiatives. And to me as well, it's a source of great hope. Great. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Such an amazing dialogue, isn't it? Michelle, Julieta, thank you so much for exploring this issue in such an honest and passionate way. We need to keep on listening about this type of messages. And Michelle, thank you also for giving us the opportunity to learn from your experience. I hope next year we can report back on the progress made in our 7 asks. I know many of you have lots of questions and comments about this, so I encourage our participants to start discussion threads to continue the conversation and post your ideas and responses on social media using the hashtag COVID Call to Action and in the chat.